Actually, I'm not Muhammad Asate, we switched our role, so I'll be chairing this session. There are 4 papers in this session, and I was given only 75 minutes to finish it. So what I would request is presenters maximum to limit your presentation to 15 minutes. So that will give you 60 minutes, another 15 minutes for question and answers. So what I will do, I will, raising my hand again and again, that means it's time to finish it up, okay? So with that, let me start with the first presentation. It's in Turkish. Hopefully next time I'll learn how to do it. So why don't you go? You'll be presenting Turkish yourself, right?
Yes.
And your boss is sitting on the...
Yes.
In front of us.
Ne yapıyorsunuz isterseniz daha rahat. Çok iyi olur. Sağ sol. Işık bir deneyin bir ışık. Işığına bakayım.
Tamam ışık.
İlerliyor değil mi sağ sol? Tamam.
Merhabalar, hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Sunumu Türkçe yapacağım. Gaziantep Üniversitesi'nden araştırma görevlisi Mehmet Fatih Boğan. Bu çalışmamız geleneksel ve İslami piyasa endekslerinin performanslarının hem karşılaştırılması hem de bu endeksler arasındaki nedensellik ilişkisini inceledik. Bununla ilgili bir sunumumuz olacak. Zaman kısıtından dolayı ilk kısımları hızlıca geçmek durumundayım. Biz bu çalışmamızda kullandığımız endeksler Dow Jones İslami Endeks ve Türkiye Endeks ve Morgan Stanley yine Turkey Conventional and Islamic Turkey Islamic Endeks. Bunları kullanacağız. Endeksler hakkındaki genel bilgileri geçiyorum. Yalnızca şu kadarını söyleyelim. Bu endekslere dahil olan firmalar kumar, alkol, otel, eğlence, domuz ürünleri gibi bu tür faaliyet konusu, bu tür faaliyetler olan firmalar bu endekslere katılamıyorlar. Peki sadece bununla sınırlı mı? Hayır, tabii ki değil. Bunun dışında önemli olan 3 tane finansal filtre var. Bunlardan birincisi toplam borçların toplam aktiflerine oranının %33'e eşit olması, eşit veya büyük olmaması gerekir. İkincisi alacak hesaplarının toplam aktifler oranının %45'e eşit veya büyük olmaması gerekir. Üçüncüsü de faaliyet dışı faiz gelirlerinin %5'e eşit veya büyük olmaması gerekir. Bu %5 konusunda bir %5, %8 gibi bir fikir ayrılığı var. Bunu da burada belirtmiş olduk. Literatürde pek çok çalışma yapılmış. Yapılan çalışmalarda daha çok endeks farklılıkları arasında bir farklılık olmadı. Endeks getirileri arasında bir farklılık olmadığına dair literatürde bir kanı oluşmuş durumda. Çalışmalar daha çok bunu gösteriyor. Yine burada değişik çalışmalarla, literatürdeki çalışmalarla alakalı bilgiler yer alıyor. Özetle şunu söyleyebiliriz. Risk ve getiri performansları açısından farklı sonuçlar elde edilmesine rağmen İslami endekse özellikle kriz sonrası dönemde daha üstün performans gösterdiğini görüyoruz literatürü incelediğimizde. Son olarak buraya birebir konumuzla alakalı Albati ve Mudor'un yapmış olduğu 2012 yılında yapmış olduğu çalışmada, nedensellik çalışmasında kriz öncesi ve sonrası dönemlerinde İslami endekslerden konvansiyonel endekslere doğru tek yönlü bir nedensellik olduğu, kriz döneminde ise tersi durumda bir nedensellik ilişkisinin bulunduğu belirtilmiş durumda bu çalışmada. Biz de aynı şekilde bu endekslerin, yani Dow Jones Turkey Conventional and Turkey Islamic ve Morgan Stanley'in Turkey Islamic and Turkey Conventional, bunların aylık getirileri üzerinde nedensellik ilişkisini inceledik. Bunun öncesinde de getirilerinin karşılaştırmasını yaptık. Burada basit hepimizin bildiği T testini kullandık. T testini kullanırken de literatürde yaygın olan bu dönemlere ayırma işlemini yaptık. Bu dönemleri neye göre belirledik dersek, literatüre bakıp ona göre belirledik diyebiliriz. Kriz dönemini 2008 ve 2009 yılları, öncesi 2005-2007, kriz sonrası 2010-2014, bir de tüm dönemler olmak üzere önce bu veri setini 4'e böldük ve bu 4 dönem içerisinde Islamic ve Conventional endeksler arasında getiri anlamında bir farklılık olup olmadığını bağımsız örneklem T testiyle inceledik. Devamında ise yine birim kök testi yaptık. Burada Zivot-Andres testini yaptık. Yapısal kırılmaya izin veren bir test. Bir de geleneksel ADF birim kök testi yaptık karşılaştırma yapmak anlamında. Nedensellik olarak da Hatem-i asimetrik nedensellik testini yaptık. Buradaki asimetrik sözcüğü şuradan geliyor. Biliyorsunuz bazen piyasada gerçekleşmiş olan pozitif bilgi akışı ve negatif bilgi akışı aynı etkiyi yaratmayabiliyor. Genelde literatürde yapılan çalışmalarda negatif haberlerin etkisinin daha etkili olduğu üzerine bir görüş birliği var. Ve bu nedenle Granger ve Young 2002'deki çalışmalarında bu getirileri pozitif ve negatif olarak köklerine ayırmış durumda. Ve Hatem-i de bu Granger ve Young'un üzerine bir test geliştirerek bu zaman serilerini köklerine ayırıp bunlar arasındaki nedensellik ilişkisine bakıyor. Ve bu işi yaparken de yine bootstrap yöntemini kullanıyor. Bootstrap yöntemini kullanmasının nedeni de serilerin normal dağılmaması ve değişen varyans problemine karşı bu işi yapıyor diyebiliriz. Yine aynı şekilde sabahki sunumda da vardı. Kayan pencerelerde nedensellik analizini yaptık. Bunu da neden yaptık? Alt dönemlerde bazen gizli kalmış ilişkiler olabiliyor. Normalde diyelim ki veri setimiz 150 gözlemden, 150 gözlemde görünemeyen ilişki alt dönemlerde görülebiliyor. Bunu görmek için de kayan pencerelerde nedensellik analizini yaptık. Metodoloji kısmını bu kadar tutuyorum. Veri setimiz de arkadaşlar Ocak 2005'ten Aralık 2014 arası şeklinde yaptık ve bu pencere boyutunu da 60 olarak belirledik. Sonuçlara geçiyorum. T-testi sonuçlarına baktığımızda burada 4 dönem içinde İslami ve geleneksel endeksler arasında, getirileri arasında anlamlı farklılık olmadığını görüyoruz. Ancak yüksek bir korelasyon ilişkisi de burada gördüğünüz gibi aralarında ciddi anlamda yüksek bir korelasyon ilişkisi var ve anlamlı bir farklılık yok diyebiliyoruz. Devamında birim kök testinde klasik ADF birim kök testine baktığımızda Dow Jones endekslerinin düzey değerde durağan olmadığı, birinci farkları alındığında durağan olduğunu görüyoruz. Morgan Stanley endekslerinin de düzey değerde durağan olduğunu görüyoruz. Zivot Anders'e baktığımızda da her 4 serinin yapısal kırılmayla beraber durağanlık sağladığını görüyoruz. Yapısal kırılma tarihleri burada önemli. Yapısal kırılma tarihlerini incelediğimizde 2008'in 9. ayını 3 seride de kırılma olarak görüyoruz. Yani bu son yaşadığımız küresel finansal krize işaret ediyor. 2010'un 3. ayı da krizden çıkışın ve ekonomik refahın Türkiye açısından krizin etkilerinin silinmeye başlandığı tarih olarak belirtebiliriz. Nedensellik testine baktığımızda öncelikle kayan pencereleri değil de bu 4 endeks arasındaki nedensellik ilişkisine baktığımız zaman da burada sadece Morgan Stanley Islamic ve Morgan Stanley Islamic'ten Morgan Stanley Türkiye'ye doğru tek yönlü bir nedensellik ilişkisine rastlıyoruz. Diğer endeksler arasında herhangi bir nedensellik ilişkisinin bulunmadığını görüyoruz. Bu zaman serilerini asimetrik köklerine ayırdığımızda ve kayan pencerelerde bu ilişkiyi incelediğimizde durumun daha farklı olduğunu görebiliyoruz. Burada pozitif köklerine bakıyoruz şu an. Dow Jones endekslerinin pozitif köklerine bakıyoruz. Türkiye'den İslamiye doğru yine bir nedensellik ilişkisi varken, daha güçlü bir nedensellik ilişkisi varken, İslamik'ten Türkiye'ye doğru da yine bir nedensellik ilişkisinin olduğunu görüyoruz. Burada Dow Jones endeksinin 2012 05 ve 2014 07 tarihleri arasında bir nedensellik ilişkisi olduğunu görüyoruz. Devamında ise negatif şoklara baktığımızda Dow Jones endeksleri için yine Dow Jones TR'den Dow Jones İslamiye doğru daha güçlü bir nedensellik ilişkisinin olduğunu ve İslamik'ten TR'ye doğru ise daha zayıf 2013'ün 5. ayına kadar bu ilişkinin devam ettiğini görüyoruz. Morgan Stanley endekslerine baktığımızda ise pozitif kökleri arasına baktığımızda Türkiye'den İslamiye doğru bir nedensel ilişkisi varken İslamik'ten Türkiye'ye doğru hiçbir şekilde bir ilişki olmadığını görüyoruz. Bu bulgu biraz daha farklı tabi. Şuraya geldiğimizde negatif köklerine baktığımızda özellikle Morgan Stanley Islamic'ten Türkiye'ye doğru baktığımızda burada güçlü bir nedensellik ilişkisini görüyoruz, rastlıyoruz. Bu da ne anlama geliyor? Aslında normal serileri yaptığımız analizde Morgan Islamic'ten Türkiye'ye doğru bir nedensellik vardı. Bunun negatif köklerden kaynaklanmış olduğunu görüyoruz. Aynı zamanda pozitif köklerinde bir ilişki yokken negatif köklerinde bir ilişkinin bulunması, Bu seride asimetrik bilgi fenomeninin geçerli olduğunu gösteriyor bize. Asimetrik bilgi fenomeni başta açıkladığımız gibi negatif bilgilerin etkileme gücünün daha yüksek olması şeklinde kısaca açıklayabiliriz. Sonuç itibariyle daha fazla uzatmadan sonuç itibariyle yaptığımız çalışmada asimetrik bilgi fenomenine dair bulgular elde ettik Morgan Stanley endeksleri için ve Dow Jones içinde hem pozitif hem negatif şoklar arasında bir nedensellik ilişkisine rastladık. Normalde literatürde bu ikisi arasında bir nedensellik ilişkisi yoktu. Buradan literatürde farklılaşıyoruz biraz daha. Devamında ise kriz döneminde özellikle İslam ve genelsel piyasa endeksleri arasında anlamlı bir farklılık olmamasına rağmen Dow Jones endekslerinde çift yönlü bir nedenselliğin elde edilmiş olması yatırımcıların risk ve getiri tercihleri açısından bir farklılık olduğunu göstermektedir diyebiliriz. Morgan Stanley içinde yine pozitif kökler arasında bir nedensellik yokken negatif kökleri içerisinde bir nedensellik vardır ve bu nedensellik tüm zaman serisinde bir nedensellik ilişkisine neden olmuştur. Bu anlamda elde ettiğimiz bu bilgiler literatürde yeni sayılabilecek bilgilerdir. Umarız bu anlamda literatüre bir katkı sağlamış bulunuruz. Burada zaman dolayısıyla kısa kesiyoruz. Eğer başka sorularınız varsa mail atarsanız memnuniyetle cevaplandırırız. Teşekkür ederiz dinlediğiniz için. Sağ olun.
Thank you, Fakir Gugan. Our second presenter, the paper is a synthetic basis for Sharia compliant stock screening methodology. There are 4 authors. I believe Shamshia Muhammad is going to present it, right? Shamshia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Prof. Kabir Hassan, distinguished speakers and participants. Before I start my presentation, I would like to share with you about my organization, ISRA. And ISRA is the International Sharia Research Academy for Islamic Finance. Was established in 2008. By Bank Negara Malaysia, and it's an initiative to promote applied research in the areas of Sharia and Islamic finance. Amongst the activities and contribution of ISRA is research, publication, events, and talent development. So ISRA also have ISRA Consultancy Sendirian Berhad. The CEO is Prof. Ashraf Hashim, and this ICISB business offers a wide range of services pertaining to Sharia matters in Islamic finance, including advisory, research, training, and translation. Okay, my presentation today is about the synthesis of weekly basis for Sharia compliant stock screening methodologies. So today I'm representing my colleagues. Then the topic covers, like you can see from the slide. So as we know, in Islamic law there are specific rules for the trading of different asset classes like cash, debt, physical goods, etc. And Sharia compliant stock in particular have to meet certain requirements as they represent an undivided ownership in the asset of the company. Scholars have proposed 3 Sharia principles, namely the originality and supremacy, al-asala wa tabaiyya, predominance, aghlabiyya, and majority, akfariyya, as the basis for determining the Sharia compliance of shares of stock, which represent a mixture of various types of assets and activities. Scholars have developed a process called Sharia stock screening to determine Sharia compliant stock, and Dow Jones is the first index provider who introduced Sharia screening methodology in 1999. So this paper attempt to investigate the basis and Sharia principle used in Sharia compliant stock screening methodologies. Okay, I don't want to talk about investment in Islam. We already know that Islam encourage investment, and we have to follow certain ruling to make sure the investment is Sharia compliant. Okay, Sharia compliant stock screening and its methodology. Okay, the stock screening methodology is a process of identifying a set of investments that adhere to Sharia principles and thus would be considered Sharia compliant for an Islamic investor to invest in. There are two types of quantitative screening, namely sector or business screening and financial screening. As for sector or business screening, it filters the companies based on their main commercial activities, and you can see what is the prohibited activities or activities that are considered as non-permissible. Okay, for companies whose activities are mixed, but the primary businesses are Sharia compliant and the subsidiary activities are non-permissible, it becomes more difficult to determine their status. For example, supermarket, which sells food, drink, household products, and other goods. However, some of those products include alcoholic drinks and non-halal meat. In this regard, Sharia scholars resolve that investment in such companies are allowed provided that only a very small percentage of the total revenue comes from the Sharia non-compliant activities. Hence, certain benchmarks have been introduced to determine the level of tolerance to the non-compliant activities, where most institutions consider 5% as the maximum limit. Otherwise, the Sharia Advisory Council of Securities Commission Malaysia, on the other hand, imposed two thresholds, i.e. 5% and 20%. This is the reverse screening methodology. Okay. The screening is conducted through certain financial ratios which are compared against a maximum level of threshold or tolerance. In terms of the financial screening, the ratio include the following: debt ratio, interest ratio, and liquidity ratio. And this, the summaries of the debt ratio, interest ratio, and liquidity ratio. You can refer to my papers for further information. In addition to the above two-tier quantitative screening, some Sharia board, particularly SAC Malaysia, perform qualitative assessment involving public perception or image of the company's activities from the Sharia perspective. In this regard, although a company is Sharia compliant based on the business and financial screening, it can be classified as Sharia non-compliant if the public's perception towards the company is not good, like Malaysia Airlines company. Okay, this is my focus. I will focus in this paper, Sharia principles underpinning screening methodologies. Okay, from the fiqh perspective, the rationale behind Sharia screening can be summarized into 2 points. First, the issue of combining fixed asset and liquid assets, means tangible asset, cash, and debt, as one subject matter. And second, the issue of mixture of assets and activities which may be permissible or impermissible. For the first issue, the concern is to decide whether the trading of such type of shares should adhere to the rules of exchanging money with money or exchanging fixed asset with money, or both. Meanwhile, the second issue pertains to choosing the rules for trading such type of shares in the sense that whether the rules for halal asset, haram asset, or both should be applied or not. Okay. The first Sharia principle is the originality and subordinacy. Al-asalah wa tabaiyah. This concept of originality signifies that the formation of a legal ruling is to rely on the principle or original thing. Hence, the subordinate should not be considered in the formation of an Islamic ruling. The subordinate al-tabi' should follow the original in its Islamic ruling, and you can see there are 4 types of subordinacy. And however, in order to establish any of this type of relationship, basis is required. The basis can be textual evidence from Sharia sources, like Quran and Hadith, linguistic, custom, and contractual basis. Okay, in determining original and subordinate, one needs to identify the direct relationship between two things. If both of them can exist independently, then neither of them shall be deemed as subordinate. Thus, the ruling of each of them will be different and will not rely on each other. On the other hand, if one thing, i.e. subordinate, is dependent on the existence of other thing, i.e. original, the same ruling of original can be applied on the subordinate unless there are clear textual evidences from the Quran or Hadith that specify separate ruling for each of them. Okay. There is a very interesting view from Al-Quradawi, where he argued that this Professor Al-Quradawi, where he argued that if the principle of originality and subordinacy is adopted, the quantity of subordinate is not significant in determining the legal ruling. Accordingly, the ruling is based on the original regardless the amount or quantity of the subordinate. However, the authors opine that this view may only be adopted if the subordinate is a permissible thing. But if the subordinate consists of haram assets or activities, this view is inappropriate to be applied. This is because there is a mixture between halal and haram element. The legal maxim, إذا اجتمع الحلال والحرام غلب الحرام, need to be taken into consideration. Based on this legal maxim, if there is a mixture between halal and haram element, the haram element will be considered as a dominant part. However, the haram will dominate the halal with following condition. First, there is doubt, ishtibah in identifying the permissible and impermissible. Second, inability to distinguish between halal and haram element. And the last one, the haram element is equal or more than the halal element. Based on these 3 conditions, it can be concluded that if there is a mixture between halal and haram, even though the haram is only subordinate, there is a need to look into its amount or percentage to ensure the haram is less than the halal portion. Therefore, in this scenario, it is necessary to apply other concepts on top of the principle of al-asala wa tabaiyah, such as the concept al-ghalaba, predominance of aktsariyah, majority, which will be discussed in the next slide. Okay. Sharia, the second Sharia principles underpinning the Sharia stock screening is predominant, al-ghalaba. This concept of predominance has been expressed in many legal magazines. Among others are the following: al-ibrah bil-ghalib ash-sha'i' la bil-qalil an-nadir. Okay, the concept of predominance is similar to the concept of majority in the literature of Islamic jurisprudence. In fact, many of scholars do not differentiate between the two concepts of such. However, few scholars differentiate these two concepts, although they also agree that these two concepts are not mutually exclusive. The concept of predominance is similar to the concept of majority in the literature of Islamic jurisprudence. In fact, many of the scholars do not differentiate between the two concepts as such. Since the concept of predominance is a qualitative and abstract concept, the criterion of predominant and subordinate is quite subjective. It differs from case to case. Therefore, most of the scholars support that in any case, the predominant and subordinate should be decided based on the custom, uruf. However, Hassan, as cited in Al-Quradawi, says that has to be decided on quantitative basis, then it should be around 80% to 90%. Okay, then we move to the last Sharia principle, majority, al-aktsariyah. The concept of majority is based on the notion that majority stand for the whole in Islamic rulings. As we can see from the slide, there is a different words in the literature of the principle of Islamic jurisprudence. However, all these Islamic legal maxims connote the same meanings. So, Successfully, in coming out such a ruling, minor cases should not be considered, arising from rare incidences, for they will take the ruling of majority cases. Okay. In terms of criterion of majority, there are many jurists holding different views on determining the criterion of majority and minority. For example, Imam Abu Yusuf opines that majority is something which more than half or more than 50%. Whatever is less than 50% should be considered as minority. On the other hand, Malikis have various opinions in this regard. Some hold that 1/3 can be majority, some you have half as minority, and some consider 1/3 as minority, yet some even restrict minority in less than 1/3. Okay, the view that 1/3 is minority is based on the hadith where Rasulullah SAW said, "As-suluf was-suluf kasir," 1/3, yet even 1/3 is too much. On the contrary, some scholars do not put any specific ratio for majority and minority. They maintain that the criterion for majority and minority is subjective. It should be based on custom, uruf. So whatever is customarily deemed as major in a case should be taken as it is. However, this view is not conclusive and leaves the interpretation open for manipulation. In the author's view, the word aksar is used in most of the legal maxim related to the concept of majority, which demands comparative majority. It needs to be quantified with an exact measurement. Therefore, the criterion for majority should be more than half or more than 50% based on the lexical meanings and logic. The opposite side of majority is minority. The percentage of minority should always be less than the percentage of majority. In this way, the majority can be 49%. Okay, I would like to just a brief information about the Sharia principle adopted in stock screening. Say for Islamic Fiqh Academy (IC), based on its resolution in 1992, it's not allowed in companies whose activities are made with permissible and impermissible dealing. As for the mixed asset, the Islamic Fiqh Academy prefers the concept of predominance to be applied in trading Islamic securities. In 1988, it declares that if the capital of Mudarabah consists of mixed asset, the trading of this certificate is allowed on the agreed price with the condition that the goods and user are predominant among other assets. However, the Islamic Fiqh Academy later adopted the concept of original and subordinate along with the concept of predominant. It proposed the two concepts as the solution of two different situations. Okay, in 2012, there are another Sharia standard for trading suku, share, suku and unit, where it's stated that when the underlying asset of the security are a mixture of debt, cash, tangible asset, usufruct and right, it can be in one of two circumstances, where the cash and debt are subordinate to that which can be validly considered to the principal, and the security include ownership of the principal. In this case, it's permissible to trade the security without taking into consideration the ratio of cash and debt to the total asset. However, if the cash and the debt are not subordinate or the security does not include ownership of the principal, the trading is subject to the rules of predominance. Okay, for Aufi, according to the Sharia standard number 31, Aufi agrees with the Islamic Fiqh Academy decision for its activities. However, it made an exemption for subscription and transaction in these securities. It states, based in its opinion on the concept of majority and removal of hardship, the interest-bearing loan and interest-bearing deposit of companies should not exceed 30%, respectively, of the total market capitalization of the company. Meanwhile, the income generated from the interest-bearing deposit of any other impermissible activity should not exceed 5% of the total income of the company. Okay. As for the mixed asset, Aufi prefers to use the concept of original and subordinate. It opines that original asset is the one which conform to the main objective and business activities of the company. Additionally, the main business activities should comprise of dealing in tangible assets, usufruct and right. In this situation, the question that should be considered subordinate to other assets. Okay, for Sharia Advisory Council. Okay, for Sharia Advisory Council of Securities Commission Malaysia, which I'm one of the member of this council. It's dealing with the company's heavy mixed activities and or asset if the is permissible based on the principle of general of trouble and minor uncertainty. For mixed asset, it applies the concept of original and subordinate by stating that the core activity of the company should be permissible. It set 5% criterion for the income generated from the activity explicitly impermissible in Sharia, while 20% criterion for income generated from activities implicitly impermissible in Sharia. Findings and recommendation. There are differences of opinions among scholars in determining the Sharia non-company activities and the maximum level of tolerance to allow a company to be involved in those activities so that the shares of stock of the company are Sharia compliance. The differences exist due to the unavailability of definitive text from the Quran and Sunnah on the matters, and this matter is fall under ijtihadi matters. It is therefore quite challenging to identify which Sharia principle is the most suitable basis for determining the relevant criteria in stock screening. So this study, however, finds that the most suitable Sharia principle, which could be the main basis in assessing the activity of company, is the principle of al-asala wa tabi'ah. On top of that, we need to adopt also the concept of al-aghlabiyah or al-akthariyah. So you can, if you need further information and the detail of the finding and the recommendation, you can read from our paper. So with that, I end my presentation. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Professor Shamsia Mohammed. She's from Israel, and our next presenter is Professor Englu S. Enkuchik. A review of Securities Commission Malaysia's revised Sharia stock criteria. So these features will come very close to each other. So let's hear from Professor.
If you want, you can.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And marhaba. The title of my paper is a review of Securities Commission of Malaysia's revised Sharia stock screening criteria. I'm from Prince Sultan University in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Let me go straight to the point. Just want to make it brief. The Securities Commission of Malaysia introduced new Sharia stock screening criteria in 2013, which was a revised version from the original one, which was originally, if I'm not mistaken, in the mid-1990s, okay, 1995, 1996. Now there are several providers of the Sharia index or indices, including Standard & Poor, Morgan Stanley, and then also Financial Times, FTSE, for example. And compared to all of those, despite the revision, the screening criteria adopted by the Securities Commission of Malaysia is still considered to be less stringent. For example, compared to Dow Jones and also Morgan Stanley, and that has to do with whenever you have a company which is considered to have to belong to the mixed business group, in which its core business is permissible, but it also has some activities in the
permissible businesses. For example, it has a subsidiary operating in, for example, in production of non-halal food or maybe liquor and so on. Now, there are two sides of arguments in terms of the leniency of the criteria. The critics argue that it may affect credibility of the screening body in Malaysia compared to international standards, compared to MSCI, compared to Standard & Poor's, for example. But the proponents argue that more rigid screening process may limit the list of investable stocks from the small stock market, because the number of stocks, total number of stocks listed on the Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange is only about 1,000 stocks. So if you were to use a very rigid screening criteria, then it might lower, the number of investable stocks from the Sharia viewpoint can be very, very small. So what's the problem with that? I'll get to that later. Right. Now, in the revised screening criteria, the Securities Commission of Malaysia retain the qualitative assessment, meaning that companies, as explained by the presenter, the presenter before me, is going to be assessed based on the core activities. As long as the company is not involved, the core activities is not in the provident activities, then the company will be retained in the Sharia compliant list. Now, and then following that, the Securities Commission of Malaysia adopted a two-tier approach to the quantitative assessment, which include an assessment of the business activity and also an assessment on the financial ratios. Before, in the old criteria, there was no assessment on the financial ratios, especially on using information from the balance sheet. So this is basically an improvement over the prior criteria. So for the business activity benchmarks, in the revised Sharia screening methodology, before, there were a few benchmarks of 5%, 10%, 20%, and 25%, but now it's been reduced to only two, of 5% and 20% only. And there were also two new financial ratios assessment in the new criteria, in which the benchmarks for both has been set at 33%. Before there was none. Now, the 5% benchmark will be applicable to the following business activities: conventional banking, conventional insurance, gambling, liquor and liquor-related activities, pork and pork-related activities, non-halal food beverages, Sharia non-compliant entertainment, interest income from conventional accounts and instruments, and tobacco and tobacco-related activities, and also other activities deemed non-compliant according. Now, the last three, before, in the old criteria, the benchmark was set at 10%. Now it's been reduced to 5%. Right. And the 20% benchmark for the business activities will be applicable to the following activities: hotel and resort operations, share trading, stockbroking business, rental received from Sharia non-compliant activities, and other activities deemed non-compliant according to Sharia. Now, before, in the old criteria, in the old screening criteria, the first three, hotel and resort operations, share trading, stockbroking business, the benchmark was set at 25% rather than 20%. Now it's been lowered to 20%. The way the calculation is done, the proportion of the non-compliant business activities is going to be derived from overall revenue and also profit before tax of the non-compliant activities, and then compared against the relevant business activity benchmark. So if it breaches 5% or 20%, then the company is going to be considered non-compliant in this case. For the financial ratio benchmarks, there were two ratios introduced. Number one, the cash over total assets, and number two, debt over total assets. And both ratios, which are intended to measure riba and riba-based elements within a company's balance sheet, must be lower than 32%. This is actually similar, almost similar to the one set by Morgan Stanley. Now, there are two issues here with the Sharia screening process: whether you want to make it more lenient, whether you want to make it more restrictive. that will be the impact of Sharia screening on the universe of compliant stocks available to form efficiently diversified portfolios. That's number one. And number two, whether Sharia screening is going to be costly to Muslim investors. That is whether does Sharia screening affect the performance of portfolios formed by Islamic investors compared to unscreened portfolios. That's basically the two issues. So that's what my paper is about. Now, the arguments for less stringent screening criteria for the Securities Commission of Nations include the fact that the pool of stocks in the Malaysian stock market is already small. So if you were to impose a more stringent criteria, that may result in shrinking size of eligible stocks. That's one. And as a result, it also may affect the ability to form well-diversified or efficient portfolio. Now, there was a study done by Sani and Othman in 2013, which inspect the status of previously Sharia-compliant stocks before and after the new criteria in 2013. And what they found out was 23% of previously compliant companies failed when they did this. And also when the Morgan Stanley screening criteria is applied to the same group of stocks in the sample, they find that only 39% of the companies remain Sharia compliant. So the number becomes smaller as a result. Now, as of now, if we were to look from 2010 and 2014, this information comes from the Securities Commission. The total listed securities on Bursa Malaysia as of 2014, November 2014, is about 905. And then out of that, based on the new criteria, the percentage of Sharia compliant securities is about 74%. Before the introduction of this new criteria, for example, in November 2012, 89% of the stocks were considered to be Sharia compliant. In 2010, it was 88%, so it was almost 90% before. Now it has gone down to around 70% after the introduction of the new criteria. And this is the list of Sharia-compliant securities based on the industry classification. Basically, they are quite, well diversified. You find, for example, 2014, 107 stocks in consumer products, 200 stocks in industrial products, 146 stocks in trading and services, for example. So now, do we need? The question is, how many stocks do we actually need in order to be able to form efficient portfolios? Do we need all 1,000 stocks, 500 stocks? That's basically the question. Now, fortunately, there have been some studies which have attempted to identify the efficient number, the optimal number of stocks that you need in order to form an efficient portfolio. And in terms of the findings, they kind of mix. So it can be as low as 8 stocks or as high as 100 or 200 stocks. For example, there are several studies that have found that they have identified that you need between 10 to 40 stocks to be able to form an efficient portfolio. Or in a survey of several finance and investment textbooks by Newbold and Poon, it says that you need about between 8 to 20 stocks. And in a more recent one, in a recent study in 1999, Cleary and Cobb says that you need between 20 to 50 stocks, whereas Newbold and Poon, again in 1999, find that you actually need up to 100 stocks in order to be able to fully diversify your portfolio. Right. Now, okay. So in general, most studies have shown that, and now the second one, the second, in order to address the second issue, whether Sharia investments will be affected by the fact that you have a lesser number of stocks to choose from. In general, most studies have shown that Sharia-compliant investments or socially responsible investments do not significantly underperform non-screened portfolios. For example, there are a few studies that have been done on that by Hakim and Sheil in 2004 involving stocks in the US, Hussein in 2005 using FTSE Global Islamic Index and also Dow Jones Index, Islamic Index. A couple of studies in Malaysia by Sarigi using Sharia stocks on Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange, and also Al-Baiti and Ahmad also in 2008 on Malaysian stocks. And I also compare the performance, I look at the performance of the socially responsible investment, which is quite close in terms of the way they screen the stocks to the Sharia stocks. For example, studies done on British stocks by McIntosh and his co-author, Humphrey and Lee, involving Australian stocks, and Chang and Wheat involving US stocks. Now, almost all of the studies have found that there is no strong evidence to support the claim that Sharia investment underperform non-screen portfolios or non-screen funds. Right. So as a conclusion to my paper, the Securities Commission of Malaysia's screening criteria has been more stringent compared to pre-2013. It does have an impact, but kind of moderate on the number of eligible stocks following revision. But if a more stringent criteria is imposed, then outcome might be sizable. Right. But based on empirical evidence, there seems to be lack of evidence to support concerns about the ability to form efficient portfolios, and also about the claim of underperformance compared to the unscreened portfolios. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Imkuchik, and we have our final presentation. Yasir, how do you say that name? You're from Turkey?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, there are similarities between the first paper and the fourth paper. And Yasir, you're a student?
I graduated from ICISEF.
Okay, you graduated from ICISEF with his PhD?
Master.
Master.
Yes.
So you have 15 minutes, okay?
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. I will present impact of macroeconomic variables, volatilities on Sharia-compliant and non-compliant equities in Turkey. This presentation is related with the other presentations. I hope we will benefit from this. This is the content. First, introduction, brief literature review, empirical study, policy recommendation, and conclusion. My research question is there any significant difference between Sharia-compliant and non-Sharia-compliant equities in their relationship with macroeconomic variables? As you all know, equity market has a crucial role in the economy for development, and also it has an important role in wealth distribution, because almost everybody can invest in stock market, especially from Middle East, so the wealth can distribute it to bottom, and it is important for justice in the economic system. Stock market bases on real economic activities, so by nature it is more Islamic. As you all know, mudaraba, musharaka type of financial investments are similar to stock market. So it is by nature more Islamic than the banking sector and the bond and other financial instruments. Also, Sharia compliant stock market might have some comparative advantage in overall macroeconomic system, because there are some restrictions in Sharia compliant stocks we learned from the previous presenters, and also in Turkey, market capitalization of stock market is much lower than the potential, so it should be promoted, especially the Sharia compliant stock market is very below than the potential level. It should be promoted. It will be very beneficial for the overall economy. This is stock market capitalizations and the GDP per capita, GDPs. As you see, Turkey is 300 30 billion something market capitalization of stock market, and the GDP is 822 billion in 2014, and it is much lower than the developed countries. This is another illustration. It shows the market capitalization per GDP among the peer group. Turkey is very below than the potential level. It is less than 50%, almost 30% of GDP, the total market capitalization in Turkey. What is Sharia compliant stock? We learned this very well from the previous presenters, so I skipped this. But I may mention that in Turkey there are some Sharia compliant stock indexes like DGIM TR, MSCI TR, and Katılım 50 indexes. These indexes, Katılım 50 indexes, is made very recently, maybe two years before. There are 50 companies in this index, and in DGIM TR it is around 30 companies. MSCI TR is similar to DGIM TR. There are less companies. As the previous presenter explained, in Malaysia there are more than 600 companies listed in Sharia compliant stock in Malaysia, but in Turkey it is around 50 companies. This is for my research. I made two different indexes. One is Sharia compliant, the other one is Sharia non-compliant. I tried to distinct these indexes completely as much as I can. I tried to make 100% Sharia compliant and 100% Sharia non-compliant. It starts from 2003 and continues to 2015. As you see, this is the description. It starts from 20 billion in 2013 and it achieves to 172 billion in 2015. These are the debt to asset ratio and interest income. As you all know, for Sharia compliant, debt to asset ratio and interest income should be below some limits. Literature review. There are some papers about this issue. The Mansur Masih and Ismet Pacha prepared a very comprehensive study. They take Sharia compliant and Sharia non-compliant stock indexes from all over the world, and they applied macroeconomic variables. There is a study for Indonesia. For Turkey, there is no substantial coverage for this issue. It is the first paper. In terms of macroeconomic variables and Sharia compliant, Sharia non-compliant stock indexes relationship. Empirical study, I applied three methodology: OLS, time series, and the Vevlet technique. This is my model for OLS. This is dependent variables. These are the independent variables. As macroeconomic variables, I take exchange rate, industry productivity index, money supply, and interest rate. This is monthly data from 2003 to 2015. And for dependent variable, this is the market capitalization of the Sharia compliant stock and Sharia non-compliant stocks. This is OLS results. These are not very trustable. This is very old technique, but there are some bias in these techniques. But I applied to get a general idea. As you see, there are some differences between Sharia compliant and Sharia non-compliant. For Sharia compliant stocks, the money supply and industry productivity index are significantly effective on Sharia compliant stocks. For Sharia non-compliant stock indexes, interest rate, money supply, and the exchange rates are significantly effective. I applied time series to go more deep. I applied co-integration tests and the long-run structural modeling. For both of them, there is one co-integration for Sharia compliant and Sharia non-compliant stocks. It means there is a theoretical relationship between macro variables and the Sharia compliant stock index and the Sharia non-compliant stock index. For Sharia compliant stock index in long run, only in the industry productivity index is has effect for Sharia non-compliant, industry productivity index and interest rate is effective. I found. This is value technique. Value technique separates the time into scales. Unfortunately, this is not clear, but I can explain anyway. This is for money supply. These are for money supply. These are for exchange rate. These are for industry productivity index, and these are for interest rate. It explains in different time scales how is the relationship. For instance, here interest rate and the Sharia compliant stock. This is for Sharia non-compliant stock index. It will take too much time. I skip this, but I will explain the results. Interpretation of the results. There is a significant relationship between some of the macroeconomic variables and stock prices. Interest rate and exchange rate have negative impact on stock returns. Possible reasons are increasing in cost of capital, increase and substitute investment opportunities like bonds. Sharia compliant stock index is less exposed to interest rate because of Sharia constraints. So this might be a comparative advantage for Sharia compliant stocks. Exchange rate has mostly negative relationship with stock returns. In Turkey, you may know the dollar is rising, so the stock market is decreasing. Mostly in short term, there is negative relationship. This might be economic perception. This might be related with economic perception. For industry productivity index, in short run, in value analysis, I couldn't find any significant relationship, but in long run, there is meaningful relationship with industry productivity index. It means in short run, in stock market, speculative behaviors are effective, but in long run, it based on real economic activities. And money supply, I couldn't find any significant relationship with money supply. Policy recommendation. Government may take some initiatives to promote the stock market, such as tax deduction, security of some amount of investment, and prevention of speculative actions as much as it can. There should be proper education programs intended to teach people how to invest in stock market. In Turkey, the investment into stock market is very little. I think public should be educated on this issue. They should invest more. On supply side, equity markets, the number and that of smaller cap listing should be increased. And large buying opportunities should be created for the newly issued assets. In Malaysia, there are lots of Sharia compliant asset management companies. And they are very well. They are doing very well. In Turkey, almost there is no Sharia compliant asset management company. It should be promoted. Turkey's and also SMEs should include into stock market. Additionally, Sharia compliant stock market should be promoted as a different asset class. And this is the conclusion. I applied 3 techniques, and the results of the research provide evidence that Sharia compliant stock index differ from the non-Sharia compliant stock index. In future development plan of Turkey, stock market Sharia compliant stocks should be taken into consideration and promoted.
Thank you, Yasir. You are well intentioned. So actually we had 4 presentations and pair of 2 and 2. The first and 4th presentations are kind of related. The first paper dealt with this index, conventional index and Islamic index within Turkey, and how does it work? So we had 4 presentations. it's a pair of two. The first and fourth presentation, there are some similarities. First presentation dealt with both, by the way, the Turkish stock market, but the first presentation dealt with the indices, Islamic Index in Turkey and Dow Jones Islamic Index, and they compared with the conventional, and they run some taxes, econometrics technique, and draw some conclusion. And the fourth paper dealt with individual stocks in Turkey. They have created Sharia compliant index and non-Sharia compliant index, and they have used different econometric techniques, and they come up with some conclusion. And agreement is that Turkey does not have Islamic asset management company, and it's a new experiment, and actually the participation banks, hopefully, because Turkey has a vibrant stock market, so sooner or later it will catch up with Malaysia, and provided you have the human capital to do all this thing. And the second and third paper, again, the second paper deals with the strict issues of what is permissible and not permissible in speaking methodology. So those who are not familiar with like stock investing, there are two types of filters that we apply. One is called moral filter, that a Muslim investor, or if you want to invest Islamically, you should not invest in a company which is engaged in haram activities. An example would be a company who sells pork or alcohol. And the second filter is called financial filter. There are three financial filters, and that's where this agreement is coming from. Also, this first one, moral filter too. Like for example, a hotel. A lot of airlines, for example, the Turkish Airlines. Let me give you an example. So, what is its main business? Its main business is to carry people from different transportation from one location to another location, both domestic and international. So, and they also serve alcohol in Turkish Airlines. So we have to look at really, that is not their main business of serving alcohol, but they do it for the convenience of the customer. So if that segment is within certain limit, that is Sharia compliant. So even in the moral filter, there is some leeway that you give some relaxation. For the financial filter, you have, like for example, the debt cannot be more than 33%, but there are different variations depending on the country. Let's say a country is very highly indebted. In that country, Sharia solar allow more than 33%. Now, your majority of the business has to be real activities, so your account receivable over total asset cannot be more than certain percentage. Again, that also variation from locality to locality. And finally, your haram income, financially speaking, like interest income cannot be more than certain percentage of your total income. So this is the way the screening is done. But again, there is a considerable leeway or flexibility of changing this ratio from one locality to another, depending on the local culture and depending on the economic situation. So this is the nicely fit these two papers together, and I congratulate all of the authors. You have presented very well, and we are coming to very close. I want to take just two questions for the audience. If you have any question, you raise your hands and direct to any of the presenters. Any question? So it seems to me everybody understood what they said. That's wonderful. Okay, so we are almost to the end. I was given that I must finish by 3:23. We still have 7 minutes. Okay. Let me, since I'm a professor, I want to use this 5 minutes. By the way, do you want to say anything in addition? You want to say something? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Prof. Kabir. I just would like to add some information that, as Securities Commission says, regulators in Indonesia. So, if we compare with Dow Jones and FTSE or other Standard & Poor's, they only rely on annual report to screen the stocks. But the Securities Commission can do more than that. Not only rely on the annual report, but the regulators can ask the company more questions, can ask more details from the company. So if you compare the Sharia stock screening in Malaysia is more detailed, more what we call is daqiq. I mean, muassasah al-Ukra. I mean, from the index provider. So if we compare, so the details of the information we got from the company is sufficient. We suspect, for example, in the annual report it says the income from the beverages is such amount, and we can further ask how much from this income is from the Sharia compliant beverages. So we can differentiate between Sharia compliant and non-Sharia compliant in more detail. So that's the difference between regulators who do the screening and the non-regulators who do the screening.
Hocam siz şey dediniz, bu finansal kriterler ülkeden ülkeye finansal kriterlerin ülkeden ülkeye değişiklik gösterebildiğini ve bu kriterlerin bütün şirketler tarafından sağlanmasının zor olacağını belirttiniz. Burada sizin söylediğinize katkı olması açısından Rahman ve diğerlerinin 2010'da yapmış olduğu bir çalışmada Malezya Menkul Kıymetler Borsası Bursa'ya kote olmuş ve İslami kurallara uygunluk kurulundan onay almış şirketin verileri kullanılarak bir çalışma yapılmış. Bu İslami kurallara uygunluk kurulundan onay almış 642 şirketten sadece 198 tanesinin Dow Jones tarafından belirlenen borç ve likidite kriterlerine uygun olduğu tespit edilmiştir. Yani şeriat kurallarına göre 642 şirket onay almışken Dow Jones'un finansal kriterlerine göre bunlardan sadece 198'i şeriat kompanisi olarak incelenmiş. O kapsama dahil edilmiş yani. Teşekkür ederim.
Very good for the specification. Basically, he is saying that according to the rule which how many stocks survive. And that relates to brother from Prince Sultan University, that the question is, when you have the screening mechanism, you are restricting the asset universe. So whether that leads to a loss of diversification potential. And actually I have also done a series of papers in this area. Now it has been found ethical stock in general do not necessarily underperform compared to unethical or conventional fund, mutual fund. When it comes to stock investing, sort of similar result arises. And specifically, Islamic mutual fund also does similar to conventional mutual fund. And that brings a very important policy implication. So let's say you want to follow your faith. You do not want to invest in conventional mutual fund. The question is, can you do it keeping your faith? And the answer is yes, you can. Now, Yassi also used a lot of web lab technique. I know it's very popular. Mansur Masi uses this a lot. So Yassi actually, if I understand correctly, actually he went to the Akhtar universe and created his portfolio. But you did not create your own portfolio. You just took the indices and you tried to do this empirical differences. Now, so this screening mechanism or following your faith, and if you want to invest Islamically, it does not necessarily mean that you are sacrificing return. At best, you are equal, if not better, but you get an added advantage. You are investing according to your belief, and you also believe that if you do that, there will be reward hereafter. So let's say my exercise says that, yeah, I lose some return, but brand name clothing, you pay a premium price. Halal meat in the United States costs more. So what's wrong with that? Ultimately, your faith and your commitment will also shape the industry. In the morning, many of my classes are talking about the moral economy. I talked about, the social science. So within this context, in the institutional setting, you will determine the shape this industry will take. And it is not enough to leave all these matters to Sharia scholars. And believe me, I would say that there are not many competent Sharia scholars, fiqh muamalat, who understand all the spinning mechanism. Speaking about this, nowadays the technology has gone that far, the data is available. You can do the screening if you like in every week. And so that it is more Sharia compliant. But of course there is a transaction cost involved, so you have to weigh this. But I think the annual screening is way too long in stock investing. So I think we really should, if Turkey wants to adopt this, they can really reduce this frequency. So let's say quarterly or monthly, that's the way. And you impute that cost within your technology, because the more halal it is, the better it is. That will bring the socio-economic objectives of Islamic finance. So with that, I want to conclude. I want to thank everyone for attending, and let's give hands to our presenters. I think I have one more exercise to do. Okay. So I was given these certificates. So let me start with first presenter. I believe Professor Aliata and Fatih Huban both are here, right? So, okay. Professor, you want to come up here? Thank you very much. Fatih? Presenter, actually we have four, and only one person is present, Professor Shamsia Mohammed. So thank you. Marzan, Farooq Habib, and Inan Salam. So you will carry all three, right? Thank you. Now, before presenters, brother, you have to help me. You have to say his name right so that I can do it justice. But is this a Malaysian name?
Yes, it's Malaysian.
I see a lot of smiles far and all these things. That's it. Good presentation. We are the only co-author. We're done. Time to your topic.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Ve salatu ve selamu ala seyyidina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecmain. Evet, sunumum Türkçe olacak. Gelir dağılımındaki adaleti sağlamada zekat müessesesi cini kat sayısı konulu bir sunum. Bir anket çalışması yaptık bu konuyla alakalı. Zekat, herkesin bildiği gibi İslam'ın 5 şartından bir tanesi. Sadece ibadet noktası veya fıkhi boyutu yok. Aynı zamanda sosyal boyutu ve ekonomik boyutu da zekatın bulunuyor. Bugüne kadar yapılan çalışmaları, ulusal çalışmaları incelediğimizde zekatın genellikle fıkhi ve sosyal boyutu üzerinde durulduğunu, ekonomik boyutu üzerinde fazla çalışmaların olmadığını, ekonomik boyutuyla alakalı çalışmaların daha çok Malezya ve Pakistan'da yapıldığını görmüş olduk literatür taramasından.
Elbette fıkhi boyutuna bu sunumda giremeyeceğiz. Ancak bazı noktaları belirtmek istiyorum. Zekatın nisap konusu önemli bir nokta. Zekat dinin taabbudi, yani emredilen dediğimiz taabbudi kısmından, ibadet kısmından ve nisap miktarı çok önemli. Nisap miktarı her ne kadar zenginlik ölçüsü gibi bilinse de nisap miktarına ulaşmadığı halde belki toplumun zengin addettiği kimselerin zekat mükellefi olmadığını görüyoruz. İşte 39 küçükbaş hayvanı olması, 4 tane devesi olması, 79 gram altını olması toplum nezdinde zengin sıfatına haiz iken dinen nisap miktarına hiçbirinde ulaşmadığı için zekat mükellefi olmuyor. Tevbe suresinin 60. ayetinde en temel referansımız Tevbe suresinin 60. ayetinde 8 tabakadan bahsedilmiş. Zekata müstahak olanlar. İşte onlar fakir, miskin, zekat memuru, köle, mücahit, borçlu, yolcu, müellefel kulüp dediğimiz kalbi İslamiyet'e ısınacak insanlara da zekatın verilebileceğinden bahsedilmiş. Tabii bunu güçlendiren birçok hadisi görmekteyiz. Zekat İslam'ın köprüsüdür denmiş hadis-i şerifte. Bu hadise biraz baktık sıhhati noktasında. Taberani'de geçen bir hadis, Suyuti'de geçiyor, Beyhaki'de geçiyor aynı zamanda. Ravisinin de Ebu Derda Hazretleri'nin olduğu ravisinin söylenmiş. Türk Dil Kurumu'nda köprü nasıl tanımlanmış ona baktık. Köprü için herhangi bir engelle ayrılmış iki yakayı birbirine bağlayan ahşap, kagir, beton ve demir yapı denmiş. Yani köprü ifadesinin hadiste bir manayı, önemli bir manayı ifade ettiği noktasında seçildiğini düşünmekteyiz. Çünkü köprü herhangi bir engelle ayrılan iki yakayı birbirine bağlayan bir yapı. Yani o köprü iki ayrı yakayı birbirine bağlaması noktasında zekat için İslam'ın namaz için direğidir denmişken zekat için köprüsüdür denmiş. Burada gelmeden evvel emek ve sermaye noktasında bir dünyada bugüne kadar bir sürü çekişmeler olmuş. Ben de Fransız ihtilalinin, Meksika devriminin ve Bolşevik devriminin sebeplerine baktım. Acaba bu ihtilallerin nedenleri nedir diye ve birçok ihtilal var da en bilindiği bu ihtilaller olduğu için bunlara baktım. Fransız ihtilali için kralın lüks içinde halkın sefalet içinde yaşaması sebep olarak söylenmiş kaynaklarda. Kralın baskısı denmiş, halkın soylu, rahip, köylü gibi sınıflara ayrılmasıdır denmiş. Vergi yükünün köylülerin üzerinde kalmasıdır denmiş. Ve kralın yeni vergiler ihdas etmesi, yeni vergiler koymasıdır denmiş. Yani sosyal bir adaletsizlik, yani gelir dağılımındaki bir adaletsizlikten söz edebiliriz Fransız ihtilali kebirinde. İkinci olarak Meksika devrimi 1910 ve 1917 yılında vuku'a gelmiş bu devrimde köylülerin ve burjuvaların ayrıldığını, %80 nüfusun köylü olduğu, %20'nin de burjuva olduğu ve devrimin temel sebebinin de gelir dağılımındaki adaletsizlik olduğu kaynaklarda yer almış. Bolşevik ihtilaline baktığımızda Lenin bu devrimi gerçekleştirmiş. Burada da zengin ve fakir diye toplum iki tabakaya ayrılmış ve sosyal adaletsizliğin en temel sebebi olduğu bu ihtilalin kaynaklarda yerini almış. Yani şunu görmekteyiz, dünyanın çoğu ülkesinde ihtilalvari olayların, isyanvari olayların temelinde aslında gelir dağılımındaki adaletsizliğin yattığını görmekteyiz. Burada İslami tabirle avam ve havas tabakasından söz edebiliriz. Avam tabakası, havas tabakasının altında, yani elbette tam eşitlikten bahsetmek zaten fıtrata da aykırı. Elbette %100 herkes eşit olsun diyemeyiz, denmez de. Ancak bu iki tabakanın birbirine elbette bir köprüyle yakınlaşmasından söz edebiliriz. Yani gelir dağılımındaki adaletin sağlanabilmesinden bahsedebiliriz. Yani avamdan havassa bir hürmetin, havastan avama da bir merhametin gitmesi gerekir ki bunu sağlayabilecek yegane müessese, özellikle Müslüman toplumu için yegane müessese zekat köprüsüdür. Hadiste de zaten bu ifade kullanılmış. Aksi halde bu sınıflar arasında sürekli çekişmeler, ihtilal sesleri eksik olmayacaktır. Yani tüm dünyada böyle olduğuna göre Müslüman toplumlarda da bu sıkıntı görülüyor. Peki zekatı diğer yardımlardan ayıran nedir dediğimizde, zekat işte dediğimiz gibi taabbüdî kısmındandır. Yani bir emirdir, zorunluluktur. Dolayısıyla veren şahıs, mesela bizim ülkemizde şu ifadeler çok kullanılır. Denilir ki benim vergimle başka kimseler finanse ediliyor. İşte bedava elektrik, bedava su gibi şeyler kullanılır. Yani bu vergi işin içine girdiği zaman böyle bir psikolojik tepki, vergi tepkisi, subjektif vergi yükü dediğimiz bir mana ortaya çıkıyor. Fakat kimse zekattan böyle bir serzenişte bulunması mümkün değil. Zaten gönüllü, isteyerek verilen bir şey. Burada vergiyle mukayese etme ihtiyacı hissettik. Sebebi de bazı kaynaklarda zekatın bir vergi çeşidi olduğu, zorunlu bir vergi çeşidi olduğundan bahsedilmiş. Fakat çok ciddi anlamda vergiden farkı var. Bunların en önemlisi verginin ademi tahsis dediğimiz bir özelliği var. Yani bu aynı zamanda bütçenin bir ilkesidir. Ademi tahsis bir toplanan gelirlerin giderlere sarf edilmemesi gerektiğini, yani belli gelirlerin belli giderlere tahsis edilmemesi gerektiğini ifade eden bir ilkedir. Fakat zekatta ise Tevbe suresinin 60. ayetinde de belirtildiği gibi 8 tabakadan başkasına verilmez. Yani tahsis ilkesi vardır. Vergi kamu hizmetlerinin finansmanı için elbette kullanılmalı. Fakat gelir dağılımının adaleti için verginin çok da başarılı olamayabildiğini görmekteyiz. Çünkü ademi tahsis ilkesi var. Nereye harcanacağı belli değil. Fakat zekatta ise harcanacak kısımlar belli. Bir de ikinci özellik olarak harcanabilir gelire etkisi noktası var. Biz buna kamu ekonomisinde vergi çarpanı diyoruz. Yani arttırılan bir birim verginin milli gelirdeki etkisine vergi çarpanı diyoruz kısacası. Toplanan vergiler tam anlamıyla harcama eğilimi yüksek kitlelere ulaşamadığı için vergi çarpanı da o nispette küçük oluyor. Fakat zekatta ise harcanabilir gelire etkisi daha büyük. Yani harcama meyli çok yüksek kitleye ulaşması gerektiği ve ulaştığı için ulaşır ulaşmaz o zekatların harcandığını söyleyebiliriz. Harcandığı için de çarpan etkisinin, yani zekatın çarpan etkisinin vergiye göre daha yüksek olduğunu söyleyebiliriz. Yansıma ve bedavacılık noktasında değerlendirdiğimizde, bunlar da kamu ekonomisinde anlatılmış konular. Vergide subjektif ve objektif yükler söz konusu. Vergi mükellefi maruz kaldığı vergi yükünü başkalarına yansıtmak istiyor psikolojik olarak. Fakat zekatta böyle bir durum söz konusu değil. Bedavacılık noktası var. Yani bir vatandaş kendi faydasını tam anlamıyla deşifre etmiyor, söylemiyor. ne kadar o hizmetten yararlanacağını söylemiyor. Asimetrik bilginin olduğu böyle bir ortamda kamu hizmetlerinin çok kaliteli olmadığı, yetersiz olduğunu söyleyebiliriz. Bir de gelir ve ikame etkisi noktasında değerlendirmek istiyorum. Verginin gelir etkisi, artırılan bir birimlik verginin mükellefteki tesirini ifade ediyor. Yani vergi oranı arttırıldı, kişi çalışmayı mı tercih ediyor o eski gelirine ulaşmak için, yoksa boş vakti mi tercih ediyor? Yani çalışmasını daha mı azaltıyor? Eğer çalışmasını arttırıyorsa artırılan vergiler, buna verginin gelir etkisi. Eğer çalışmaktan vazgeçiyorsa da buna ikame etkisi diyoruz. Zekatta ise zekatın oranı düşünüldüğünde, zekat oranı yani ekseriyette %2,5 düşünüldüğünde kesinlikle gelir etkisinin olduğunu söyleyebiliriz. Hem oran noktasında hem de gönüllülük noktasında. Bir de tarafsızlığı var. Yani verginin tarafsızlığına baktığımızda ihdas edilen yeni bir vergi veya oranı arttırılan bir vergi mükellefin kararını değiştiriyor mu, değiştirmiyor mu? Eğer değiştirmiyorsa vergi tarafsızdır diyebiliriz. Eğer mükellefin kararını değiştiriyorsa o zaman o vergi tarafsız bir vergi değildir. Zekata bu noktada baktığımızda zekatın kesinlikle tarafsız olduğunu söyleyebiliriz her noktada. Diğer taraftan 3 dakikamız. Yapmış olduğumuz anket çalışmasında 250 kişiye anket dağıttık. 220'si cevapladı bu anketimizi. Daha çok zekat verebileceğini düşündüğümüz kimselere dağıttık bu anketi. Burada zekat şeffaf bir sisteme duyulan ihtiyacı araştırdık. Şeffaf, güvenilir bir zekat sistemine olan ihtiyacı. Toplumda gelir dağılımında adaletsizlik var mı diye sorduk ve %57'si ulaştığımız mükelleflerin %57'si böyle bir adaletsizlikten söz ettiler. İki tane temel sıkıntı gördük. Onlardan bir tanesi asimetrik bilginin, yani zekat hakkında insanların tam bilgiye sahip olmadığı ve insanların teşvike, yani zekat mükellefi olabilecek kişilerin zekat vermeleri noktasındaki teşvik yetersizliğinin farkına varmış olduk. İnsanların teşvik edilmesi gerektiğini söyleyen %69 kişi vardı. Zekata muhtaç kişilerin tespitinde araştırma ve bilgilendirmeye ihtiyaç vardır. Yani fakir bulamamaktan insanlar şikayet ediyordu. Her fakirim diyene güvenemediğinden bahsediyordu insanlar ve bunu diyenlerin oranı da %75 ankete katılanlardan. Zekatın önemli bir köprü olabileceğinde %80'in ittifakı vardı. Ve gelir dağılımındaki adaleti sağlamada zekatın önemli bir, hatta en önemli müessese olacağını da %71 ifade ettiler. Hakiki anlamda fakir ve muhtaç olan kişileri bulursam zekat vermekte tereddüt göstermem diyen insanların oranı %80. Güvenilir, şeffaf ve verdiğim zekatın tam olarak kimlere gittiğini garanti eden bir sistem olsa üzerime düşen zekatı hemen veririm %70 yaklaşık bu şekilde ifade ettiler. Biz de burada o anketin en altına bugüne kadar hiç zekat verdiniz mi dedik. Şunu da göstermek istiyorum. Şöyle bir pardon hocam, size gönderdiğim bir şey yapmışım. Bu şekilde kişilerin zekat mükellefi olup olmadıklarını ulaştığımız kişilerde tespit etmeye çalıştık. İşte hane halkı gelirlerini sorduk. Hisse senedi olup olmadığını, altın, gümüş gibi madenlerin olup olmadığını sorduk. Tacir midir, değil midir? Meyve sebzesi var mıdır? Küçükbaş hayvanı, büyükbaş hayvanı, devesi ve kira geliri var mıdır diye kategorize etmeye çalıştık ve bu şekilde bir hedef kitlesi oluşturduk. muhtemel olan ve en sonunda da bugüne kadar zekat verip vermediklerini sorduk. Güvenilir, şeffaf bir sistem olsa zekat verir misiniz'e evet cevap verenler içerisinde birincil ve ikincil gelir dağılımlarını hesapladık. Kısaca hemen gösteriyorum hocam. Buradan Gini kat sayısını birincil gelir dağılımında, yani ankete katılanların hane halkı gelirlerinden birincil gelir dağılımını hesaplamaya çalıştık. Sonra Gini kat sayısını, yani ankete katılanların gelir dağılımlarını, Gini kat sayısını 0.20 olarak hesapladık. Elbette bu dünya ortalamalarının çok çok altında olmasına rağmen ankete katılanlar arasında bize bir fikir vermesi noktasında bunu bulduk. Sonra evet, güvenilir bir sistem olsa bugüne kadar zekat vermedim ama güvenilir bir sistem olsa hemen veririm diyenlerin verecekleri, onların üzerine düşen zekatları bize beyan ettikleri bilgiler çerçevesinde hesapladık ve ikincil gelir dağılımını Lorenz eğrisiyle göstermiş olduk. Daha sonunda da Gini kat sayısını 0.17 olarak değiştiğini görmüş olduk. Elbette bu çok muteber bir rakam olmayabilir, fakat elimizde çok net rakamlar da yok, çünkü zekat Türkiye'de çok fazla iştihar etmiş bir müessese değil ve insanların vakıflara verdiği ve vakıfların da %10'una, yani vakıflara yapılan bağışların Türkiye'de %10'unun zekat gelirleri olduğunu tespit edebildik. Daha çok insanlar el altından veriliyor. Elimizde net veriler hiç olmadığı için sadece toplumun farkındalığını, toplumun zekat verme meylini tespit etmeye çalıştık. Bu şekilde bir çalışma olmuş oldu.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is A. Chamershaudin. I'm from Bangladesh. I'm doing my... Sorry. Okay. I'm doing my PhD on Islamic jurisprudence and law in Marmara University in Istanbul. My topic is actually through Islamic banks Zakat House, investment of Zakat funds in microfinance to remove poverty in Bangladesh, a new model. Sorry? Okay, it's okay.
Yeah, should be okay.
Okay. So my topic is actually through Islamic Bank Zakat House, investment of Zakat funds in microfinance to remove poverty in Bangladesh. It's a new model. Actually, Bangladesh stands in third position among the Muslim countries in terms of population. So more than 150 million people in Bangladesh, among them 31% live under the poverty line, and many scattered, many other poor people scattered in different cities over the Bangladesh. And also, since inception of Bangladesh in 1971, after that many government and non-governmental institutions took revolutionary steps to wipe out the poverty, mainly Grameen Bank, BRAC, ASHA, etc. Then, actually the role of Zakah and its importance in Islam is exemplified by the incident of Hazrat Abu Bakr, when he declared war against to the people who didn't pay the zakah. Though through many organizations have been working since inception of Bangladesh in 1971, still the poverty remains. The main factors are actually the unfair authorization of financial distribution and the injustice in donation. So now the questions that comes to our minds, why do we need a new model like Islamic Bank Zakat House? And why it will be the more appropriate one for the removal of poverty in Bangladesh? We start asking, though there is a huge zakat payment system in Bangladesh to remove the poverty, but why it is not going through the right direction? And there are three focused questions arise in the many minds. The first one is actually, though Bangladesh is a Muslim country, why zakat is not implemented properly? And secondly, despite the availability of Islamic banks in Bangladesh, why zakat is duly not collecting and it is declined? And third is, an institution of Zakat House, if established in Bangladesh, will it bring any changes in the poverty line? So, well, as establishing a new model like Islamic Bank Zakat House in Bangladesh, I think it is the appropriate one because it answers above the three questions. Okay, the article of this study, we have some objectives. Actually, to bring a new system of zakat funds in Bangladesh, and through the medium of Islamic banks in Bangladesh, we can implement the money in the microfinance sector, and it will properly implemented. It will be properly implemented of zakat possible in the country, and this money will be invested in the microfinance sector, so that poverty can be reduced. You may ask some questions why zakat is not implemented in Bangladesh. Actually, we have some problem because zakat collection is very low. In terms of though people, we have a huge people, but zakat collection is very low. And we have also religious ministry, and they have zakat board, but they don't have any structure that can be organized to collect the money properly. And in our country, though salat, I mean the prayer, fasting and hajj are performed very strictly, but zakat is maintained. It is not maintained like other prayers. And that's why it's a big problem. So we brought some opinions of the scholars there are different group of scholars. Some group opined that zakat money cannot be invested in the microfinance. On the other hand, some told that it is the proper step of alleviating the poverty by investing the zakat money. For example, Wahabat Zuhaili and Taqi Usmani, more scholars claim that if zakat money is invested in the microfinance, so the beneficiary cannot get the money, and the right of the poor can be dismissed. On the other hand, Yusuf al-Qardawi and Saleh Furfur, Mustafa al-Zarqa, and Abul Fattah Abu Ghada, many scholars from Arab and non-Arab, they claim that it is the first step to alleviate poverty if we invest our zakat money in the microfinance. And Saleh Furfur said that actually zakat money, though it is not allowed to invest in the microfinance, but it is the opposite of the qiyas. It is as a part of istihsan, it is allowed. So we brought two models from two nations. They implemented zakat money in microfinance, and we got one from the Selangor model. It's Malaysia. Actually, it runs by the state of Malaysia, province Selangor model. Another one is Center for Zakat Management. It is an independent institutions. And surprisingly, I saw one of the main founder of this project is Mr. Kabir Hassan. He is here. And we found here, why Zakat Islamic Bank Zakat House? The question. We have more than 56 commercial banks. Among them, 8 Islamic banks are working full-time Islamic banking. So we brought here the 8 Islamic banks, and we have more than 900 branches and more than 26,000 officers that are working in the Islamic banks. 8 banks we have. So this is our model, Islamic Banks Zakat House model. It will consist with the 8 Islamic banks, and it will work only for the poor people to enhance their life and make the life comfortable and possible. So how to collect the money from the Islamic banks? We brought some of points here. The collection process, for example, house itself. House itself means 8 Islamic banks will consist a house. It can be said the Islamic Bank Zakat House. And Zakat House will collect the asset in every year. Islamic banks has asset yearly, annually. They will give the money to the house. This is the first step. The second step is actually banks owners and shareholders and a sponsor. We have in banks, they have a sponsor, shareholders. They will give because in the Islamic bank, everyone has to perform the salah during the namaz time, and they have to also perform the saum, fasting, and hajj. Why not the zakat cannot be implemented in their banking sector? So my question is, they have to take the collections. They have to collect the money from the sponsors and shareholders. And third position is the officers who are working in the banks. We have almost 27,000 officers. So if they give annually a portion of money to the house, it will be a huge, big amount for the zakat collections and for the investment of microfinance. And fourth, you can see that religious school and mosques. We have more than 100,000 madrasa, Islamic schools, and mosque also, masajid. So if the zakat house distribute cell box, we can create a cell box in every mosque or in every madrasa, and the head of the madrasa and the head of the mosque will be the responsible of this box. And through this cell box, zakat can be collected through this way. And fifth, we see that many foreign donors, like Middle East and especially also Turkey, they send money to the individually different people and different institute. This zakat, but it is not distributed properly. That's why we face a huge problem. So zakat house can collect this money through the proper channel, like Islamic Development Bank, IDB, and also Middle East. They have also different institutions also, and they have individual sponsors. They can collect through this way. And finally, we have in 8 Islamic banks have more huge clients. So when these 5 points will be established within 4 or 5 years, and people will believe them, because still in Bangladesh, the people, they have faith in the Islamic banks. Why? Many conventional Islamic banks have altered from the conventional bank to Islamic banks. That's why we have a faith on the people. So the zakat house can collect the money from the clients and through the Bangladesh. When people will believe them, when they will see the work of the people, zakat house, and it can be performed very well. So we have also some products for the zakat house. If zakat house is established in the country, so we have to launch some of products like Muazzal, by Mudaraba, by Muzara, by Salam and Qard Hasana. And this type of products is actually in existence in the Islamic banks currently. So we have some recommendations for this project. In seasonal food means actually in Bangladesh we have 4 seasons. So we have also fruits like banana, mango, different type of fruits. We can invest this money as a microfinance investment to the unemployment youth, so that they can launch any product or any business. And also we have vegetation system in Bangladesh. It is a good place for the investment to invest in the vegetable products and as per the Mudaraba system. And we have also a huge unemployed youth. And if we, our Zakat house, if trains them freely in different training like tailoring and tailoring and fish, bamboo crafts, we have a lot of things. Then we can teach them, we can train up them, and we can send them to different countries to income in every year through this Zakat house. And this Zakat house can also launch another 2 products. Actually, in Bangladesh, we have also halal haram business. So Zakat house can stand to stop the haram business through the launching the halal business. And we have also huge female, and Bangladesh is famous for the garment sector. Most Western society, Turkey even, Western society and different countries takes the garments or clothing from Bangladesh. So if we supply them missionary, tailoring, and if we give a lot of machinery, supplies and tools, they can stand, they can survive, they can produce different products to reduce the poverty from Bangladesh. So we can conclude our project with some points. Actually, this is the first step of our first step of introducing a new project like a Zakat house. So we can add and drop by adding, modifying our ideas. And also we submitted 2 projects named CZM, Center for Zakat Management, and another one Salangar project. These 2 projects have successfully done a lot of projects. So Islamic Bank Zakat House also can follow these 2 main projects. And also we can start our projects through the first asset of the banks, and secondly shareholders money in every year. And the third is 27,000 officers can give the money in every year to this Zakat House to start a new business. And I think this will help to remove the poverty from all over the Bangladesh. And finally, we can say that this model, if it is established in Bangladesh properly, then it can be the model for the other country, especially the least developed countries, and especially in the Muslim world. So this is our project, and thank you for listening to me, and thank you.
Thank you very much. We have been very good with the timing, so we'll go to the next one. The next one again is on the poverty issues and the Zakat. Mahmoud Badesina we've been looking at the Islamic economic system, poverty, insurgency, and looking at the Zakat distribution and the capacity. So,
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My name is Dr. Ayuba Mahmoud Adeshino from Adekunle University, Nigeria. Sorry, I don't have any precision on the PowerPoint. The topic of my paper is Islamic economic system, poverty and insurgency, from zakat distribution to capacity building. Previous studies have indicated, I've talked much about the issue of zakat, or the importance of zakat in the elevation of poverty among the Muslims. But when we look at these studies, we find out that they were talking about zakat distribution. So which means that anybody that is unable to satisfy his needs will have to go to these people, that is those people who are entitled to pay zakat or who have ability to pay zakat. They will go to them and they will give them what to eat or what to anything in their possession. so as to take care of their needs, of their immediate needs. We now discovered that this attitude has been in operation, and it doesn't have any concrete effects in the society, especially among the Muslims, which means that the poverty level is still in increase. So we now sit down and see that we have to change the way the Zakat fund is being handled. That is why I came up with this title that we need to move from Zakat distribution into capacity building. In my paper, I discussed about the I made an overview of Zakat. So whereby I discovered that the importance of Zakat in Islam, which means that Zakat, paying of Zakat is very compulsory to those who have ability and capacity to pay. Then I now look back and I also discuss the issue of Zakat, especially in Nigeria. We found out that during the colonial period, so the colonial masters outlawed payment of Zakat in Nigeria, even especially in the north, so where the system of governance was Islamic. Even part of the south, so the system of government was Islamic. But when the colonial masters arrived in Nigeria, they outlawed the payment of Zakat, and they only allowed payment of taxes. So that attitude now had negative impact on Zakat situation in Nigeria, and that the system up to now is still suffering from the act. Now, so during that period, so few Muslims who were able to pay Zakat, they were doing it secretly. So they would look in the society, the less privileged people, they look for the less privileged people in the society, and they would visit them and give them the Zakat. But now that the era of colonialism is going in Nigeria, so the people now, we have some migration now who have stood up and make sure that they were collecting Zakat. But the story is still the same about the distribution. So whereby, so they will look for people in society, so who could not make estimates, and try to give them from Zakat fund. Now, then even individual people, so will come out, especially during Ramadan. So they will make a broadcast on the TV and on television that so day I'm going to pay my Zakat. So go and meet me at so place. So now this system now is still, it doesn't have any positive effect in the society, especially among the Muslims. So that's why we are now suggesting that we have to move away from Zakat distribution and to capacity building. So what do we mean by capacity building is that we need to train people in the society. So who are the desperate in the society that maybe we train them, we give them certain skill, so that they will move away from Zakat recipients to Zakat payers. So if we can train their children in school, or if we can use the Zakat fund to establish technical schools, so to train these people now, so we give them some certain amount of Zakat fund so as to establish their business. So this will go a long way to cushion the effect of poverty among the Muslims. So we are now suggesting that so this paper now, so the main objective of the paper is that we should try to move away from Zakat distribution to capacity building. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the next session. And in terms of time, we are doing very well. And thank you to Mahmoud Ayuba. The next paper, again on the similar issues, looking at the development of this issue, is the financial services consumption adoption measuring Islamic microfinance financial constraint, looking at reaching out to people. So we'll have Permuta Balandar who will be presenting this session. It is all yours.
This one?
Yes, this one.
If you want, you can.
This is too. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, let me introduce my name. My name is Numata Wulandari. I'm working with my supervisor, Dr. Salina Kasim. I'm from International Islamic University of Malaysia. Now my paper topic is about financial service consumption adoption in measuring Islamic microfinance financial constraint in order to reach people at the bottom of the economic pyramid. First of all, I will explain about the bottom of the economic pyramid. So there is an economic pyramid which is it has 4 tiers. The people at the bottom of the economic pyramid is the people at the tier 4, which is characterized by the people which has the income only $2 per day. So this paper, this paper is only literature review. For the purpose of the study, the first is critically review about the financial service delivery constraint aspect. This theory comes from the Papias and Ganesan in 2010, which is to measure the financial service delivery constraint aspects. The introduction of the study is many people at the bottom of the economic pyramid still face the financial constraint to access Islamic microfinance. So here I measure using accessibility, affordability, availability, and also adequacy. And then what the purpose is to provide practical suggestion in order to reach the people at the bottom of the economic pyramid. Okay, the method and data is using theoretical review of financial service delivery constraint in order to present the views from the academician and also the practitioners related to the concept of financial service delivery constraints in Islamic microfinance. So the result here is there is Islamic microfinance institution have own strength and weakness using 4 A's: accessibility, affordability, availability, and also adequacy approach. The first is accessibility measurement. The first is distance to Islamic microfinance, collateral requirements, heavy procedures, indebtedness condition, unstable sources of income, attitude of microbank or microfinance staff. The first is accessibility problem. The measurement of the distance between the poor borrowers and also Islamic microfinance will create financial constraint problems if it is too far. Too far here, it means that more than 2 kilometers the distance from the Islamic microfinance and also the borrowers. The solution is Islamic microfinance should include the distance aspect as a consideration in the financing grant decision to make monitoring process more easier. And then the procedure in Islamic microfinance, there is no problem in this aspect because the Islamic microfinance usually use the simple procedure for reviewing and approving loan application and use-friendly method of credit delivery system. Then next problem is about the lack of collateral requirement. Solution is forming a kind of solidarity group to borrow from Islamic microfinance. It is like a group of members and also establishing a third-party independent collateral institution. And then there is a problem again about the absence of formal credit bureaus in some countries, especially for the poor countries, which is it can be function as monitor credit risk and also offer indebtedness. The solution is doing a feasibility study to create formal credit bureaus to monitor credit risk and also offer indebtedness in Islamic microfinance. More still, accessibility. A specific characteristic of those people at the bottom of the economic pyramid is having unstable sources of income. So the solution here is Islamic microfinance must provide another measurement of accessibility rather than unstable sources of income. As you know that now Islamic microfinance will use sources of income as the financing granted requirement. Now can change of like a saving here. There's an accessibility problem is lack of education and also financial skill of staff. And also the clients stand unfamiliar with documentation and also accounting convention. So the solution here is pre-training to prepare dealing with non-Sharia compliant products since they are not properly educated and also trained in Sharia. Now jump to availability. The problem is how difficult to build Islamic microfinance, which is must connect infrastructure and facility in secluded area, and also difficult to expand financing, and also limited branches, lack of access. The solution is preparing infrastructure and also facility for Islamic microfinance. The availability measurement here is lack of rural branches, limited banking facility, lack of timely and accurate information, lack of awareness of various schemes of of microfinance service availability. Now the availability problem is lack of rural branches. The solution Islamic microfinance must try to build up their office in the remote area which is lack of access to formal financial institution. And then the next problem of availability is lack of accurate information to evaluate borrower characteristic in Islamic microfinance. Then the solution here is using credit checks to gather borrower data and also prospects. Next, about availability problem is about language and also cultural differences between Islamic microfinance staff and also borrowers. It can make difficult to them to market their product. Solution is using training and development and also empowering local staff to work in Islamic microfinance. And then the next problem is of availability is lack of borrowers' awareness in various schemes offered by Islamic microfinance. The solution here is to train the borrowers to know exactly about the product, especially the requirements of the product. Next is adequacy measurement. There are two adequacy measurements here. The first is credit selling and also availability of various financial products. The problems is Islamic microfinance usually offers small amount of credit compared to commercial bank, and they have decided credit selling policy in every financing. It mustn't burden their customers. So the solution here is to manage the policy carefully in order not to burden their consumer. So the affordability, this is the last, is profiting from the poverty dilemmas, and also ethics and moral take a significant role related to the profit. The first is affordability is increasing of indebtedness, which can make the repayment problem. It can be solution as by increasing good debt literacy of the customers. Okay, that's all about my presentation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think in terms of time we are quite good. Therefore we can take some questions. We can entertain some questions. So if you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand and we'll take care of one question. If you could identify to whom you are asking the questions, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Shehu from Nigeria. I have two questions for two of the presenters, or response. Simply, the issue of investing Zakat funds, like in a country in Bangladesh. Yes, you have cited, the author cited two views, each one well supported by scholars in the area, but that given the incidence of poverty in a country, the choice between investing the Zakat proceeds or the revenue in a predominantly poor society, which is maybe in dire need of the money for immediate consumption. I think maybe the researcher and all the scholars should look at the particular situation, depending on the affluence of a society. If the Zakat funds are not immediately needed, yes, one of the opinions of the scholars can be taken. But in a situation where the Zakat funds is barely needed, then the other view of the other scholars can be also taken. So that's my opinion. And then the last speaker, in her presentation, she said she's a PhD student, which is quite good, encouraging. If this is a pilot or a presentation of intention to go to the field, I feel you should need to have a theoretical or conceptual framework that will inform what kind of maybe expectation and interpretation or outcome from the results that will be generated, so that they can be tied to a particular theoretical or conceptual maybe position in the literature. And that is very important. Thank you.
Anyone wants to comment? Anyone has any questions or comments?
Benim sorum Murat Hocam olacaktı da, onun çalışmasıyla ilgili. Hocam çalışmada şey dedi, ankete katılanların sadece zekata meyilli olan kişiler üzerinden yapıldığını söyledi. Bunun çalışmaya bir sınırlılık kattığını düşünüyor musunuz hocam? Hani sonucu etkisi nedir bunun?
Meyilli olanlar
yani öyle bir ifade kullandınız da.
Yani çalışmaya ne kattıklarını sonucunu anlayamadım.
Yani olumlu olumsuz katısı ne olmuştur? Yani genel yapılsaydı daha iyi bir sonuç çıkmaz mıydı?
Şimdi biz iki kesime hitap etmeye çalıştık, ulaşmaya çalıştık. Bir muhtemel zekat mükellefi olabileceğini düşündüğümüz kimseler, bir de zekata muhtaç olanlar, zekata müstahak olanları kendimizi toplumda tayinlayıp seçtik. Çünkü iki tarafın da şeyi önemli. Dediğiniz gibi genel yapılsa iyi olur ama yani insanlar kişisel varlıklarını çok fazla deşifre etmek istemediler. Zaten çok kişiye ulaşmayı hedefledik ama hedeflediğimizin biraz altında oldu. Hani biraz gizli bir şey gibi. İnsanlar çok fazla gelirlerini, varlıklarını belli etmek istemiyorlar. Dediğiniz gibi çok genel olmuş olsa herkesin fikri, toplumsal farkındalığı tespit noktasında gayet güzel olur. Teşekkür ederim.
Anyone else? Anyone? There's a question.
My question is for the second presenter. Do you have any fatwa on the permissibility of using zakat for microfinance?
Actually, we have brought here some of fatwa from Yusuf al-Qaradawi, Saleh Kufur, Mustafa a lot of scholars, and even we have also YC. They have YC fatwa for zakat in 1988. They presented that fatwa. It can be invested, but it should be invested when it will when the needy need, then it can be returned. For example, we invested in the many projects, but we have on other projects, other people who are actually they need the money in instant. Then at that time we have to return the money. In that case, we can invest. And also Kuwait Finance House and also Kuwait Zakat House, they have also some fatwa regarding this topic. And we already brought two models, one from Bangladesh. It's an independent institute like Center for Zakat Management. They already started and they successfully done a lot of projects. And another one from the Selangor model is actually Malaysia. They have introduced it maybe more than 10 years. Still they are working very well. So we don't have any problem. But on the other hand, if we don't invest in the microfinance, what is happening nowadays, for example, in our country, no one is intending to pay money to the poor. If Zakat House is established by the 8 Islamic banks, so we can collect and we can invest. Recently, one incident happened last year when I was in Bangladesh. I saw this news in the newspaper that only 27 people died when they went to take the money from the institute, Zakat, because they don't have any proper implementation or proper distribution system. So if we establish a new model, so it is easy to remove the poverty. Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, it seems that there isn't anything else. Just my general comment, not related to papers, but the zakat is an important issue, of course. But the capacity of zakat is rather small, and we have been putting a lot of emphasis on zakat to reduce poverty. So we have to be very careful with that. And therefore, there is one particular issue. As you may know that in Islam, the third parties, the organizations, corporations, they don't pay tax. Islamic banks, they don't pay zakat. Islamic banks do not pay zakat, as in Islam, corporations do not pay zakat. But as in the case of investing, like 2005, before 2005, it wasn't possible to invest the zakat funds. You couldn't establish a zakat fund, you couldn't invest, you couldn't do microfinancing. Sheikh Qardawi gave the fatwa, it enabled. In the same way, when you look at the annual reports of Islamic banks, of course you see that there's a zakat element there, but that is the zakat they collect from depositors and dividends payments. They themselves as an organizations, by Sharia, they don't pay. But considering that we have this huge problem of poverty, and using Maqasid al-Sharia in the process, I feel that Sharia scholars have to come up in the same way with investing zakat, and corporations should pay zakat as well, because they pay tax anyway. So by the same meaning, they should be able to pay zakat as well. Because in the time when Sharia was constructed, corporation was not there in the Muslim world. But in addition, of course, poverty is a real issue, and Maqasid al-Sharia is there as an instrument for us, and therefore we have to be innovative in terms of trying to find solutions for zakat, and therefore I have been defending the position that corporations should pay zakat, regardless of the conditions that the Sharia or the fiqh suggests that they shouldn't. But that's something, of course, Professor Kaf is not here, so I speak freely, and hopefully they can move into it. But of course, poverty remains an issue, and zakat is an instrument, but of course limited with the current base. One is 2.5% in general. Two is collected, unfortunately, not in a systematic way. It's not managed. And therefore, we have to be more innovative, try to find solutions for the economic development problems in the Muslim world. If there isn't any other questions and comments, we can close the session. Okay? There is one there.
I just, from what the chairman of the session is saying, I'm not also a learned scholar or a scholar in the field anyway.
I didn't know that, sorry.
But the issue, yes, double taxation, the investors in the bank pay zakat from their dividends.
Yes.
And the bank also pays zakat.
Yes.
Wouldn't that amount to double taxation? That there could be, when I pay as a shareholder and then the bank also pay, is it paying from the dividend, which before it goes to the shareholders or after? And it could be a corporate social responsibility for the bank to be paying something, like for maybe amounts of collection for banks, for customers default, which in the morning or yesterday someone mentioned it that it can be given as charity because the bank just didn't earn that money. So, and in addition to that, if they can set aside something, but this issue of double taxation for Islamic banks in their transaction and so on. So I think, as you have rightly said, let the ulamas delve into it seriously and let them find solutions.
I do agree with the difficulty in terms of fiqh. But again, when the Zakat Fund issue was raised in a conference which I defended in 2005, the Sharia scholars sitting, they said, no, it won't be possible because in the Quran it says XYZ. But Alhamdulillah, Sheikh Qardawi came up because the condition is in front of you and you have to find a solution to the problem. And as regards to double zakat issue, well, corporations pay tax and shareholders pay income tax. In any way, in the taxation system you have. And I feel that the Islamicity in the Islamic banking as a prefix should have certain meaning. And that meaning for Islamic banks, perhaps, we have to be, I feel that we have to be innovative. Since they are not doing anyway corporate social responsibility much, at least they can be imposed on. But that's my view. Kabir has something to say.
Actually, to answer your question, we did a study, sort of textual study on series of Islamic Bank over a number of years. There are two theories, two positions. One position is that many Islamic banks really don't pay zakat on behalf of their customers.
Yes.
Whether the stockholder or the depositors. The other one, if they do, they let the people know, unless they were depositors. So they really do not, my understanding, they do not pay zakat again on something that has been paid zakat purified. Okay. Having said this, you actually said a very interesting thing. Actually, I want to say this thing about the zakah. We really need to do modern istihad. You know, if you read the Quranic text, nowhere it mentioned the 2.5%. No. It is only in one context. Our Rasul, Prophet Muhammad said on the cash and cash equivalent 2.5%. But if you look at the other parts, like you have the cash equivalent, the second is you have the ushur, the agricultural product, then you have the treasure trove, and then there's another question. The groves and the fruits and all these things. Now, interestingly, all these things actually done and actually had many years ago, and we still applying this. For example, Quran does not mention specifically whether it is income or wealth. Our Prophet probably on this income part, on the wealth part, the question is, let's say for example, a person who makes $1 million, another person makes $100,000. So if the person spends and takes expensive vacation, buys houses and all these things, at the end of the 1 year, his bank balance is below nisab. So this person does not pay any zakat.
Yes. But
the other guy lives a very balanced life, so he has above nisab. Now in this case, yes, the first person is richer than the second one. Yes. So should we really consider the income portion as well as the wealth portion?
Yes.
Secondly, a poor farmer, for example, 1 year waiting, the poor farmer right at the harvest 5% or 10%. Let's say he uses his store and fertilizer, he pays 5%. But a rich person, 2.5% cash equivalent, that's what he does. So those things, what really we are confusing, the devotional law, or this counsel that God has said that you have to pay zakat, but how it is being done or should be done, there is enough room for ijtihad. Because ultimate goal is to create social equity.
Yes.
So that part we really can look at when we are combining these two, transactional law and the devotional law, we get confused. Nobody really talks about the necessity, requirement of zakat, but the question is how it should be collected, how it should be paid. There is enough room for ijtihad. And we really should spend a lot of time on this thing. That's what I was trying to say this. We have the text from the Quran and Sunnah. Then we really do not delve into this thing for practical solution. Yes, you will get reward akhirah, but also God said, dunya and akhirah, right? So we really have to look at the dunya. If you can make this a living ideology, a philosophy, or way of life for the living dunya, the other people will be attracted. I'm saying it's not the sole purpose, but since we should live a life, right? And if the Quran gives us the solution and through Islam we can do that, why shouldn't we do that? We should not really leave everything on the devotional confine. We have to, in zakat case, transactional. If we take this as a transactional law, a lot of things become a lot easier for many of us. Thank you.
Yeah.
brother here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Abdullah Abubakar Lamido from the International Institute of Islamic Banking and Finance, Bayero University, Kano, Nigeria. I have found this discussion very much interesting. I think the issue of zakat, as rightly said by the chairman, should be seen from the perspective of the maqasid, the objectives of the Sharia.
Yes.
And importantly also, we should analyze the issue of zakah from two dimensions. From the dimension of the fixed aspect of the teachings of the Sharia, that is the thawabit, and from the dimension of the mutaghayyirat, that is the flexible aspect of the Sharia. In many of the teachings of the Sharia, of course scholars of Sharia have said it, that the teachings of all the teachings of the Sharia can be classified into fixed and flexible. And interestingly, if we see zakah, we can see that in zakah, there are both these dimensions put together as relate to the issue of zakah. Who and who should benefit from zakah? This has been explicitly said by the Quran. So this is fixed. But from the issue of what are the types of wealth that are zakatable, there is some flexibility in that. And I think Al-Qardawi, in speaking of zakat, has dealt with this extensively. When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu during his time, he said there will be zakat on horses. Because he realized that definitely, what actually defines wealth at that time was something different from what was happening during the time of the Prophet. So there is the flexibility in that aspect. But importantly, in the administration and management of the zakat policy, how to distribute it. This also, the Sharia has provided some, incentive for flexibility within the context of time, space, and circumstances. In a situation where you have people who are poor, and they are many, and the zakat proceed is not enough to take care of their needs. Now this is where the issue of applying maqasid, maslaha, is concerned. In the question of maslaha, there is this issue of long-term maslaha versus short-term maslaha. There is the aspect of wider scope and lower. So if you have $10,000 and you can distribute this $10,000 to 2 people, 5 people or 10 people, and at the end of the year, they will have consumed all the 10,000 naira, and they are back looking for more. But then that how the 10,000 naira can be invested, and in the next year, it might have, earned 5,000, 2,000. Then that profit can be distributed. In 5 years, probably, you will have done with that $10,000, what that amount will do, and then you still have the capital. From the perspective of maqasid, this might be accepted. And I think this is the point that Al-Qardawi has extensively discussed. Thank you very much.
No, it's okay, thank you. And that's an important perspective because some of these fiqh issues, as you mentioned, and as Kabir mentioned, is terribly old, such as diamond. There is no zakat on diamond. So if you invest entirely diamond, of all your wealth, you don't pay any zakat. Okay, because it's the fact, because you can transaction. So therefore, we have to be more innovative in such matters. And also, in one study, we have noticed that people have been shifting their wealth before 1 year so that they shouldn't pay zakat. Okay, because the wealth, and therefore the importance of, as Kabir was mentioning, the importance of rather than wealth, at the same time considering income. Otherwise, at the end of the year, the guy doesn't have anything because transferred it. So these are important issues that we have to look into, and how Sharia scholarship heavily focused on financial transaction for Islamic banks. So public policy part is important to bring, and that's important. Just before elections in the United Kingdom, 21 bishops, they issued a statement against the government that public policy is not working in favor of ordinary people in the United Kingdom. You want to see the Sharia scholars taking some stake in the public policy issues.
They are not saying anything on public policy, whether it's human rights, whether it's the development, whether public policy. And these are important issues. We know that public policy doesn't make money, but there are certain responsibilities. And with that, we'll finish, and we'll see you all tomorrow. And thank you for your patience still being around. Thank you.
Şuradan bir silebilir miyiz ya?
Neyi? Dosyanızı mı?
Bir tanesini. Ben hocama göndermiştim onu da yanlışlıkla burada şey yapmışım.
Tamam.
Tamam.